You've probably heard of a guy named HisWattson. He is one of the fastest rising players in the history of Apex. From his graveyard shifts in rank to his glory at LAN, HisWattson seems to understand the game differently than anybody else, and I'm just not talking about the esports scene, I'm talking about content creation as well. HisWattson has managed to cement himself among the greats in Apex, and today we're going to be looking at his story, starting from where it all began to where he is now. HisWattson's story is quite different from most other pros in the scene. He was a young southern boy born in Arkansas in the United States, the land of tractors, strong men, and fresh grass. One would wonder how such a god-tier player would emerge from such a rural area. So let me tell you the story, because this is a great one. HisWattson's first introduction to gaming was through his older brother. They would play games together on his brother's Xbox, and Watson began to fall in love. His first gamertag was chosen for him by his brother and was Time of Death, with Watson only being 6 years old at the time. So make of that what you will. Like, imagine being 6 and they call you Mortuary Attendant X69. That's the stuff of nightmares to a 6-year-old. Anyway, I digress. HisWattson played games every day when he came back from school. He would wake up thinking of gaming, go to sleep thinking of gaming, and be in school thinking of gaming. It's safe to say that Watson was hooked. And the funniest thing about this was that he did this for years with no internet. He was playing the Call of Duty campaign over and over again, thinking of new ways to beat the game faster. And because of this unyielding grind set, you would actually be expecting him to be doing terrible at school, but he was actually quite good at school, and his parents didn't bother him because of it. The only thing he suffered from in school was a lack of social interaction. Watson says he always was the weird guy and that he never really had any friends. No truck hangouts, no parking lot shenanigans, no parties.
What?
And he didn't really care too much. To him, gaming was the only source of fun, and beating the game in record time at the hardest difficulty was even more fun. He kept doing this until he was about 15, when he begged his dad to buy him a PC. Now, his dad took money out of his retirement savings in order to buy him a gaming laptop, in which Watson played on for 2 years. At that point in his life, they still had absolutely terrible internet at their home, and he still couldn't actually play any games online, so he began to look for a solution. The solution came pretty fast in the form of his grandma's house, which had much stronger internet, and thus he began his online gaming journey. During his 2-year laptop run, Watson made a mistake all pro players make, which is to play League of Legends.
I was playing League of Legends. I'm the worst version of myself when I play League of Legends.
Watson played League alongside some other gamers, but he was a religious League player. But then one day, his friend told him to come check out this new game that Shroud was streaming called Apex Legends. Initially, he gave some pushback, but was finally convinced by his friend to play Apex Legends for the very first time. Starting off, Watson was horrible at the game because he had never played a shooter game online before, and he also never played on mouse and keyboard. But after playing the game for a little while, something terrible happened. His gaming laptop finally gave out. Because of the unfortunate collapse of his gaming laptop, Watson went on a 1-year PC gaming hiatus. Eventually, he managed to save up enough money to buy an actual computer for the very first time almost a year later since he first played Apex Legends. It was from that point forward that his 8 to 12 hour a day Apex addiction began. HisWattson fell deeply in love with Apex because it had an insanely high skill ceiling. There was always something to get better at, whether that be armor swapping, movement, or rotating. In Apex, everyone's skill bucket could always be filled with even more, and it was the perfect game for him. He spent all his time when he was young trying to be as efficient as possible in those campaign speedruns, so much so that on the first rank split he ever played, he reached Diamond 3, which was in Season 4, so that's actually kind of impressive. And this was absolutely insane if you think about it, because anyone who has played a first-person shooter for the first time knows that at best you'll place in like gold or bronze or silver because you just don't have the mechanics. And this was his second mouse and keyboard game after Minecraft, and he was still doing insanely well. He first played together with his friend Mikey, who helped him come up with the name HisWattson. Because they had no internet in their house, Watson had to play from his grandma's house since they had that much better internet. He would beg his dad to let him stay over at his grandma's house for days, sometimes weeks at a time. He would carry around his setup from one house to the other just so he could play Apex Legends. He kept doing this for 6 months until his dad finally bought decent internet, which greatly aided his journey. He was consistently getting top 100 pred and was getting some recognition from the top players at that level. It was around this time, in season 5 or 6 or so, that he met someone who would change his life drastically. He met Keon, who was a friend of a friend, and the two hit it off and began to play together. After a short while, Keon actually suggested that they should go for #1 Predator, and Watson was down to do it, and even to stream it on Twitch. But that was when the sad reality of the situation would hit him again. He was once again faced with internet problems, and he just couldn't couldn't stream without his internet crashing. He was devastated and demoralized as the work he had put in would soon be wasted by bad internet. He needed a solution. He began to nurse the thoughts of moving out of his parents' house, and then a call came in. It was Keon, with Watson responding with, "And you know what? The mad lad did it."
And then he called me and he was like, "Dude, Watson, if I let you live with me, will you grind for #1 and just stream?"
Keon and his buddy drove 22 hours from Utah all the way to Arkansas, and then 22 hours back to Utah just to help Watson out. That's 44 hours in total. If that ain't friendship, I don't know what is.
But I'm not getting on a plane because I was scared of planes. So I was like, if you're going to come over there, you have to come pick me up. You need to drive from Utah 20 hours, come pick me up and drive me back. And if you do that, yes, I will play with you and grind Apex.
I will say that Keon is an absolute giga chad. HisWattson stayed together with Keon and his family for 4 months. He was fed and housed, but most importantly, during those 4 months, they grinded. They were #1 and 2 on the leaderboard, and their streams had grown exponentially. Watson had even been able to get a somewhat of a stable income from his Twitch streams and managed to save enough money to move into a trailer back in Arkansas. He wanted to be closer to his family, and it had way better internet than the one at his parents' house. And this marked the beginning of the story of the Trailer Park Warrior. HisWattson had been religiously grinding ranked and got really freaking good at the game. He was consistently #1 Predator for a couple of splits, and he began getting noticed by some teams in the ALGS. Because Watson had tried his hands on the comp scene before this and felt it wasn't for him because he hated to IGL. He was even approached by teams who wanted to sign him on as the IGL, and he declined their offer, stating that he doesn't want to be that in-game leader. Watson just wanted to shoot his gun, and there were no teams that would meet his conditions until he was approached by Furia. When Furia came to him, Watson was expecting the same routine to play out of them forcing him to be an IGL, him saying no and then leaving, but to his surprise, this time that wasn't the case. Furia wanted him, and they were willing to come up with any compromise just to play with him. They came to the conclusion that HisWattson will IGL the fights, but Sea Lion, who is Furia's analyst or coach, will tell him where to go. He'll worry about shooting his gun, while Sea Lion would worry about everything else. This sounded good on paper, but no one knew how well it would actually play out. Watson couldn't believe this, and he jumped at the opportunity. They actually signed him 3 days before the last chance qualifier, and this was a huge risk for Furia because HisWattson had almost never played comp before, and this was the last chance qualifier with pro league teams as the opponents. It's safe to say that Furia had their faith in him. Whether it was a good bet or not, no one could say for sure, until the team of Sarah, Panders, and HisWattson played their first scrim together. When they went in, HisWattson found out pretty quickly that the plans that they had made previously weren't working, because Watson ended up having to IGL anyways. They would make it to the end zone, but have no idea how to play. And although they came 8th in those scrims, which Sea Lion thought was good, Watson called the team together and said this.
They pulled me in 3 days before LCQ, and I was like, okay, I guess. I joined their voice chat. Okay, guys, I'm gonna play Seer, and I'm gonna IGL.
What Watson said and this philosophy would change Furia forever, because for all this time, Furia was known for being the really hard campy zone team under Tech, who was their former IGL. And you can really see that stark contrast between the old Furia and Furia's current identity. With the instructions from Watson, Furia dominated the last chance qualifier and came out first, which actually secured their spot at the Rally LAN. And when the day for LAN came, HisWattson would truly make a name for himself in the Apex scene. On the first game day, Watson noticed that they were having some issues implementing their new playstyle, and he actually had to turn to Sarah just to say this.
This is not good. Like, you are a liability. I was like, you're supposed to save us. We're having to save you. Your character doesn't do anything. Half your bubbles you have to use on yourself because the whole team shot at you. That character sucks, dude.
With Sarah now on Horizon, Furia were on fire. They absolutely demolished everyone. No one was ready for the new playstyle, and the adjustments that they made during LAN were top notch. And although they didn't come first, they ended in 2nd place with the most points above every other team. In fact, HisWattson's performance was so good that he was crowned as the ALGS Lan MVP. This was a whole new Furia than the one everyone were used to, and every other team took notes of what they had done that week. HisWattson set the stage for the Seer Horizon meta, and before we even knew what was happening, it was everywhere. With their success in Pro League, it was clear that this new Furia squad was different. the viewership, their notoriety had skyrocketed, especially Wattson's. He was consistently getting over 10,000 viewers per stream and thousands of subscribers. Everyone wanted to watch what the Trailer Park Warrior was doing, and Wattson, being the smart and talented individual that he is, recognized this surge in viewership and capitalized on it even more. He doubled down on streaming, began to take YouTube uploads more seriously, and truly leaned into engaging this growing audience. HisWattson took on various in-game challenges like Solo to Master, Solo to Predator, and various other challenges. Wattson was focused on growing his brand and becoming better at the game, and he was doing that successfully, but as you know, with the highest of highs come the lowest of lows. Right before Split 1 of Pro League 2023, HisWattson was at the peak of his viewership on Twitch, and on a certain day, he had slightly over 18,000 viewers watching at the same time, until something insane began to happen. Every 10 minutes, he was getting pulled out of his games by a hacker. This continued for a few days, and Wattson was getting really mad, and rightfully so. You're at the peak of your career and you're getting griefed by some absolute clown. He tried contacting EA support on a Friday, and they told him that the best they can do is Monday, which I guess is understandable, they don't work on weekends. But at this point, Wattson was at his boiling point, and he tried to take matters into his own hands. He thinks he finds out who the guy is that's pulling him out of his games, and he actually ends up messaging him specifically to get answers. It turns out that the hacker had been doing this for over a year, and it was never really fixed. And this guy, the hacker who he ended up contacting, is a name that you may have been familiar with if you watched the Ottr video. By the way, if you haven't, you really should. Namely, Autism Gaming for 20. He is a hacking, leaking, and cheating extraordinaire. You could safely say that Wattson wasn't really making the best decisions in this enraged state. Now, HisWattson might have had the intention of just finding out what was going on and bringing some attention to it, but let's just say those intentions weren't expressed properly. He ended up messaging the guy, and then those DMs ended up getting leaked by Autism Gaming on Twitter, which then hit Reddit. In those DMs, it was revealed that Wattson was seeking for answers while also looking for dirt on Respawn's banhammer, namely hideouts, who Wattson was known to publicly dislike and actually had gotten into a few feuds with in previous encounters. When the leaked DMs eventually made their way to Twitter in the form of a Ford and Smash tweet, it didn't go over too well with the community. Wattson tried to get ahead of the situation by quoting Forden's tweet and doubling down on his opinions, but the general consensus was that Wattson was in the wrong, with Snipedown, the Halo boomer himself, calling his antics to mutually benefit from crapping on a specific member of the security team completely out of pocket. Imperial Hal, on the other hand, stated that more people should be like Wattson instead of being two-faced, which I can agree with to some extent, but you also have to look at the consequences of dancing out of the EA tune, especially since the wording Wattson used was really problematic. You probably shouldn't say that. This led to something much worse than all the harassment and the death threats. That's right, he wasn't allowed to play the game. Barely 1 week after the entire situation, HisWattson stated on Twitter that EA had started blacklisting him from tournaments, later clarifying that he wasn't allowed to compete in a TwitchCon tournament and not necessarily the ALGS. But that was not a good sign, because the worst was yet to come. A few days before week 1 of Pro League, HisWattson was banned. At first he didn't know why, but he found out much later that it was for something relating to attempting to send hate. Now this was devastating for Furia. HisWattson was their IGL, their star player. He was the one who led them to a new style. How are they going to perform without him? Now they did end up getting a sub to fill his place, but sadly they couldn't perform well enough in that week without Wattson himself. When Wattson was back from the ban, the damage had already been done and they weren't performing as well as they used to. It was getting clear that HisWattson wasn't in it. He just had no passion and he didn't feel like he cared. And you can't really blame him too much, since after experiencing a ban like that, even though it was the results of his own actions, who wouldn't lose at least a little bit of morale and momentum? Despite their efforts, Furia unfortunately didn't qualify for LAN that split, finishing just shy of 10th place, and it was all because of one angry DM that should have been private. HisWattson takes full accountability for their failure and announced that he would be making some changes in order to improve his mental health all around. He said he would be streaming for fewer hours a day as he was burnt out and he couldn't perform at his best. Although he was in an unfortunate situation, it didn't deter him from helping out the community as he normally does. He continued to host giveaways, tournaments, he even donated to the women's scene. Most notably, he also paid the camera crew who were sort of screwed by EA at the last LAN because they didn't get paid out. And it's worth noting that Wattson did all of this before the incident even happened, even before he got banned, and before all of the arguments. And I feel like we probably shouldn't endlessly attack someone for one mistake, especially because he has acknowledged all his faults, and he does so many good things for the community that you know, I feel like it balances out. And just like his father, Watson is a nice guy at his core. In preparation for Split 2 of ALGS, Watson finally made enough money to leave his identity as a trailer park warrior in the past. All his hard work had finally paid off, and he waved goodbye to his family in Arkansas and moved to Florida. And in Split 2, Furia was back. Apart from the first day, they consistently placed top 4 on all of the match days, and just a few days ago, they secured their spot at LAN. Will HisWattson and Furia be able to produce another masterclass like in Rally? I don't know. But what I do know is that this is still only the beginning of HisWattson's story. There are a lot of tales yet to be written and a lot of trophies yet to be won. The story of HisWattson is one that inspires us to chase our dreams. Watson started from actually nothing and slowly grinded his way up to the top. Despite his situation, despite his limitations, HisWattson remained mentally driven and hardworking. His ability to always ask, how can I do this better, is what truly set him apart from the rest. In Watson's journey, I notice he seems to be very fortunate with the people around him, from a supporting family to excellent friends. Watson has truly been blessed with great people, and I sincerely wish for anyone to have that as well. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching and making it this far, and also a very huge shout out to Fallout and his weekly podcast, The Apex Experience, because that's where we got a lot of this information from. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like, subscribe, and check out this video on the screen where I covered the story of ACU. See y'all tomorrow.